Married the millionaire who paid me, but one morning he was gone without a trace. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. It all started with a contract that was never meant to feel like love. Claire had always lived in survival mode, 2 jobs, endless bills, and a hospital debt that hung around her neck like a chain. When her mother's medical expenses reached another impossible number, she stopped believing in luck altogether. Until one night, a man in a charcoal suit walked into the diner where she worked. He didn't order food. He ordered silence. "How much do you need?" he asked quietly, sliding a checkbook across the counter. Claire froze. "Excuse me?" "For the hospital. The debt. Whatever it is, I can cover it," he said. His voice was calm, his face unreadable, like someone used to negotiating million-dollar deals, not offering lifelines to strangers. She stared, confused and cautious. "Why would you do that?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because I need a wife. For 6 months." Claire's heart pounded. "A wife?" He nodded, eyes steady. "A contract marriage. Nothing romantic. Strictly business. You help me meet a clause in my late father's will, and I'll make sure your mother's bills disappear." She almost laughed, thinking it was a cruel joke. But the check in front of her said otherwise, 5 digits. Her mother's salvation written in black ink. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're the only one who looked at me tonight and didn't see money." His name was Nathan Ward, CEO of Ward Enterprises, the kind of man whose name appeared in magazines she could never afford to buy, the kind of man whose eyes seemed to carry both power and exhaustion. Claire hesitated for 3 nights before signing the papers. The contract was simple. 6 months of marriage, public appearances, no intimacy, no interference in personal affairs. In exchange, full financial freedom. She told herself it was a transaction, a deal between 2 broken people needing something from each other. Yet when she stood beside him in front of the judge, wearing a borrowed dress that barely fit, her hands trembled. Nathan's expression didn't change. He slipped the ring onto her finger like signing another deal. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Ward." The words sent a chill down her spine. Their wedding photo was taken by the assistant, printed and stored in a sleek folder before the hour ended. No flowers, no vows, no kiss. Just paperwork and 2 signatures that tied 2 strangers together. That night, in the limousine ride back to his penthouse, she looked out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and blue. Nathan broke the silence. "You'll have your own room. The staff will treat you as they treat me. Appear at events when requested. Beyond that, you owe me nothing." "And you?" she asked. "What do you owe me?" His jaw tightened. 6 months of my life." She turned away, clutching the ring that felt too heavy for her finger. In that moment, she didn't know that the man beside her, who spoke with ice in his tone, would vanish without a trace only a few weeks later, and that the contract she thought would save her would soon unravel the deepest secret of his life. The first few weeks of their marriage felt like living in a museum where every sound echoed too loud. Nathan left early every morning. Crisp suit, silent driver, no words exchanged. Claire ate breakfast alone at the marble table, surrounded by too much silverware and not enough warmth. She kept her head down, followed the rules, and counted the days like tally marks in her mind. Sometimes she caught a glimpse of him reading in his office late at night, light spilling through the half-open door. He looked distant, yet tired, as if the weight of the world sat quietly on his shoulders. She wanted to ask if he ever slept, but it was not her place. Once, during a rainstorm, the elevator stopped halfway up the tower. Nathan was there, standing beside her, both trapped between floors. The silence stretched thin. He glanced at her soaked shoes, then at the grocery bag she was holding. "You walked in this weather?" he asked, his tone unreadable. "The driver was gone," she replied softly. "I did not want to bother anyone." A pause. Then, for the first time, he offered a faint smile. "Next time, call the staff. That is what they are for." "I'm not used to having people for things," she said. Something flickered in his eyes, something like understanding. The elevator resumed, the doors opened, and the moment vanished. That night, she found a new umbrella hanging on the hook outside her room. No note, no words, just a quiet gesture. Days turned into weeks, and the cold air between them began to shift. Nathan started joining her for breakfast, sometimes late, sometimes silent. But there, she noticed he always carried a small leather notebook, pages worn at the edges. One morning, curiosity slipped past her guard. "You write?" she asked. He hesitated. "Notes, ideas, maybe regrets." She smiled faintly. "Regrets make the best stories." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a second, the walls between them cracked. One evening, at a charity gala, she was supposed to stand beside him, smile, and say little. Cameras flashed, voices buzzed. Everything about the room screamed wealth. When a reporter cornered them, asking about their marriage, Nathan froze. Claire stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "Our marriage may not be a fairy tale," she said, "but sometimes real things are not meant to look perfect. They are just meant to last." The crowd laughed softly, charmed. Nathan looked at her in quiet surprise. Later that night, in the car, he murmured, "You did not have to save me." "I was saving myself, too," she replied. He turned to look out the window, hiding a small smile. The days after that grew warmer. He started leaving little things by her door: fresh flowers, books, a cup of coffee, when she stayed up sketching. Claire, despite herself, began to feel something she had promised never to feel: safety. Until one morning the warmth disappeared. His side of the breakfast table was empty. His phone was off. The staff said he left early, but by noon, no one had heard from him. By evening, the house was filled with silence so heavy it pressed against her chest. His office door stood open. Inside, only his leather notebook lay on the desk. She opened it with trembling hands. Between pages of numbers and notes was a single line written in ink, darker than the rest: "If I disappear, trust no one." Her stomach turned cold. She read it again, slower this time. Then she saw a photo tucked inside, of Nathan standing with two men in suits, one of whom she recognized from the news. The headline below it mentioned an investigation into corporate fraud. The words blurred in her vision. She sat there for a long time, gripping the notebook, realizing that the man she had married, the man who had paid her to pretend, had left behind a truth she was never supposed to find. For 2 days, Claire called every number she could find, but Nathan had vanished, as if the earth itself had swallowed him. His company line went unanswered. His driver claimed he had received no orders, and even his lawyer refused to comment. Reporters began camping outside the penthouse gates, their microphones flashing like lightning whenever she appeared. "Mrs. Ward, where is your husband?" one shouted. "Did he flee because of the investigation?" Another added. She kept her head down, saying nothing, clutching the leather notebook like a shield. Inside were pages she had read 100 times, trying to piece together what had happened. There were bank names, dates, and the initials HL written several times in the margins. One entry caught her eye. "If anything happens, meet the person who knows the truth at Pier 47. The words looked rushed, almost like a warning written in fear. That night, Claire stood at the window. The city stretched below her, full of secrets and noise. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman who had married for money and found herself tangled in something far darker. The next morning, she took the subway to Pier 47, her hoodie pulled up, her pulse hammering in her throat. The air smelled of salt and gasoline. Fishing boats swayed lazily against the docks. She waited for an hour, then two. Just as she was about to leave, a man in a navy coat approached. He looked around cautiously before speaking. "Mrs. Ward?" he asked in a low voice. "Who are you?" she demanded. "A friend of your husband," he said, handing her a flash drive. "Nathan trusted you. He said if he disappeared, you would be the only one brave enough to open this." "Where is he?" Her voice cracked. The man shook his head. "I cannot say. But whatever is on that drive, it is the reason he is gone." And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the fog before she could stop him. Back in the penthouse, Claire plugged the flash drive into Nathan's laptop. A password prompt appeared. She tried birthdays, names, company codes. Nothing worked. Then she remembered his words from the gala. "Regrets make the best stories." She typed the word regret. The screen unlocked. Hundreds of files filled the monitor, each labeled with project names and offshore account numbers. One folder was marked Echo. Inside were scanned documents linking Ward Enterprises board members to illegal transfers, evidence that could destroy several powerful figures. Among them, a signature she recognized from the photo, tucked in the notebook, the same man who had smiled beside Nathan in that newspaper clipping. The realization hit like ice. Nathan had not run away. He had gone into hiding to expose them. A noise outside made her jump. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. She turned off the laptop and shoved the flash drive into her pocket. The front door handle rattled once, then fell silent. She stood perfectly still, listening. After a long pause, whoever it was walked away. The next morning, she found a note slid under her door. It read, "Stop looking for him, or you will end up like him." Her hands shook as she read it again. Fear clawed at her chest. But underneath the fear was something stronger: anger. She had spent her life letting others decide her fate. Not this time. She packed a small bag, took the notebook, the flash drive, and left the penthouse before sunrise. The streets were empty, the sky a dull gray. But for the first time, she felt a strange clarity. Nathan might have disappeared, but he had trusted her with the truth. Somewhere out there, he was either running or trapped, and she was the only person left who could finish what he had started. As the train carried her out of the city, Claire opened the notebook once more. Between the pages, a business card slipped out she had never noticed before. It was plain, embossed with a single line of text. H.L. Harbor Light Foundation. She stared at it, realizing this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of finding out who her husband truly was. Claire arrived at the address printed on the card just as the afternoon light began to fade. The Harbor Light Foundation looked nothing like the name suggested. It was a quiet brick building at the end of a narrow street, with a faded sign and windows covered by blinds. She hesitated before pushing the door open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A woman behind the counter looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. Claire handed her the card. "I am looking for someone connected to this," she said. The woman's smile faltered slightly. "Wait here." Minutes later, an older man with gray hair and a calm voice appeared. "Mrs. Ward," he greeted softly. "I was wondering when you would come." Her stomach tightened. "You know who I am?" "Nathan told me about you," he said. "My name is Henry Lawson. I used to work with your husband before everything went wrong." He led her into a small office filled with old files and the faint hum of a space heater. "Your husband was investigating his own company," Henry continued. "He discovered that someone inside Ward Enterprises was funneling millions into offshore accounts through fake charities. When he confronted them, they tried to destroy him." Claire's pulse quickened. "So he ran?" Henry nodded slowly. "He had no choice. The people he was about to expose have enough money and power to bury anyone who stands in their way. That flash drive you have it is proof, but it is also dangerous. She pulled it from her pocket. If this can clear his name, then why not take it to the police? Henry sighed. Because the police are compromised. Nathan wanted to finish the case himself, to release the evidence at the next shareholders' meeting. He planned to announce everything publicly. When? Claire asked. Henry looked at her gravely. In 2 weeks. She felt her chest tighten. Then we can still do it, she said. We can finish what he started. Henry hesitated. Claire, if you do this, you will be putting yourself in the same danger. These people do not play fair. Neither do I, she said quietly. For the next several days, Claire stayed in a small apartment above the foundation, working with Henry to decrypt the remaining files. Each night she studied Nathan's notes, hearing his voice in her head as if he were still guiding her. The more she read, the clearer his motives became. He had not married her just to satisfy a legal clause. He had chosen her because she was the only person who did not want anything from him. Somewhere between the contracts and the silence, he had trusted her, and she had to honor that trust. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Henry handed her a new file. There is something you should see, he said. It was a list of names, board members, investors, politicians. At the bottom, one name was circled in red. Victor Hale. Who is he? She asked. Henry's expression darkened. Nathan's stepbrother. The one who inherited half the company after their father's death. The one who wanted Nathan gone. The room felt smaller, colder. So Victor did this, Claire whispered. He set Nathan up. Henry nodded. And if he finds out you are still digging, he will come after you too. The next morning, Claire woke to find Henry gone. His office was empty. The drawers open. The chair overturned. On the desk was a single note in shaky handwriting. They found me. Leave now. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She grabbed her bag and ran. Outside, 2 black cars were parked near the curb. A man in a suit stepped out, scanning the street. Claire ducked into the alley and slipped through the back door, her pulse roaring in her ears. She did not stop until she reached the train station. As she caught her breath, she realized that the world she had stepped into was far bigger than she had imagined. She looked at the flash drive in her hand and whispered, I will find you, Nathan, and I will finish this. The train whistle echoed through the night, carrying her promise into the dark. Claire spent the next few days moving from motel to motel, keeping her head down and her phone off. Every shadow made her flinch. Every unfamiliar sound felt like a threat. She barely slept, surviving on gas station coffee and the thought of finding Nathan. On the 5th night, as she sat in a dimly lit diner outside the city, a news report on the small television above the counter caught her attention. The headline read, Ward Enterprises announces emergency shareholders meeting. Her breath caught. That was the exact meeting Nathan had written about in his notes. It was scheduled for 2 days later, at the company's downtown headquarters. Claire felt something spark inside her. This was her chance. She paid for her coffee and left immediately, heading toward the one place she had sworn never to return, Nathan's world. The city lights looked colder than she remembered, but she had changed. Fear had hardened into resolve. She used an old ID badge still registered under her name to enter the building after hours. The security guard barely looked up as she passed, her baseball cap pulled low. Nathan's office was exactly as he had left it months ago, immaculate, calculated, impersonal. Yet, beneath the surface, she could feel his presence everywhere. She opened his laptop with trembling hands and inserted the flash drive. The screen filled with data, evidence, and a final video file labeled, To Claire. Her heart pounded as she clicked play. Nathan appeared on the screen, sitting at his desk, looking exhausted but alive. If you are watching this, he said, it means things did not go as planned. I found out who was behind everything, Victor. He used our father's legacy to build a web of corruption, and when I confronted him, he tried to destroy me. I had to disappear until I could prove the truth. Claire, you were never part of this plan. I asked you to marry me because I needed someone I could trust to stand beside me in public. But then you became more than that. You reminded me what honesty feels like. If I do not make it back, tell them who Victor really is. The screen went black. Claire sat frozen, tears burning behind her eyes. All the confusion, the fear, the anger, they melted into one clear emotion: purpose. She backed up the files onto a hidden cloud account and printed the most damning documents, the ones showing Victor's offshore accounts and forged contracts. The next day, she disguised herself in a plain black suit and walked straight into Ward Enterprises' lobby. Reporters and board members filled the marble hall, buzzing with speculation. As Victor stepped onto the stage, smiling for the cameras, Claire slipped into the back of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor announced smoothly, "today, we honor transparency and a new beginning for Ward Enterprises." Claire's voice cut through the room, steady and sharp. "You mean the beginning of your cover-up?" Heads turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victor's smile faltered. "Mrs. Ward," he said tightly, "you are trespassing." "Am I?" she asked, holding up a folder. "Because I have the evidence Nathan risked his life to uncover." She stepped forward, placing the printed documents on the podium. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Victor's composure cracked. "You do not know what you are talking about," he hissed. "You think people will believe a woman who married for money?" "Maybe not," Claire said, her voice trembling only slightly. "But they will believe the numbers, and they will believe Nathan Ward." Security guards rushed toward her, but it was too late. The crowd had already surrounded the podium, snapping photos, shouting questions. The story was out. As chaos erupted, Claire turned to leave, heart pounding. Outside, rain began to fall again, cold and relentless. She walked down the steps into the storm, not caring that her clothes were soaked. She had done it. For Nathan. For herself. Somewhere in the noise of sirens and reporters, she thought she heard a voice. A familiar one call her name. She froze, turning slowly toward the sound, her breath catching in her throat. And there, through the blur of rain, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was him. For a moment, Claire could not move. The world around her blurred into noise and rain. Nathan stood only a few feet away, drenched, pale, but unmistakably alive. She blinked, afraid that he might vanish again like a dream. "Nathan?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. He nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "It is me," he said softly. "I did not think I would see you again." She took a step forward, her heartbeat thunderous. "Where have you been?" "They said you were dead." Nathan exhaled shakily, running a hand through his wet hair. "I had to disappear. Victor's men were everywhere. I barely made it out of the city the night I left. Henry helped me until they found him." Her throat tightened. "They killed him," she said quietly. Nathan's eyes closed for a moment, grief flickering across his face. "I know. He called me before it happened. He said you had the flash drive. I wanted to come back sooner, but it was too dangerous." Claire stepped closer, her anger and relief colliding. "You left me with nothing, Nathan. No answers. No safety. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" He looked at her with regret that went deeper than words. "I thought I was protecting you. I did not expect you to walk into the fire for me." She shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. "You did not just disappear from your company, Nathan. You disappeared from me." For a long time, they stood in silence, the storm wrapping around them like a confession. Finally, Nathan reached into his coat and handed her a folded piece of paper. "This is the proof Victor cannot bury. You were right to go public. The board is already calling for an emergency audit. It will all come out within hours." "And you?" she asked. "What happens to you now?" He hesitated. "There is still a warrant out for my arrest. Victor made sure of that. But if I testify with this evidence, the charges will fall apart." Claire studied him, her voice softening. Then come with me. We will finish this together. Nathan's jaw tightened. It is not that simple. If I go to the press now, they will take you down with me. You are still legally my wife, which means they can use everything against you. Let them try, she said, stepping closer. I have already survived worse. His eyes met hers, full of something raw and unguarded. You really do not know how strong you are, do you? You taught me, she said. A faint smile tugged at his lips. No, he whispered. You taught me. The sound of sirens echoed down the street. Nathan turned his head sharply. We have to go. They ran together through the alleyways, the rain masking their footsteps. Behind them, flashes of red and blue cut through the mist. They ducked into an abandoned parking garage, panting. Nathan pressed his back against a concrete pillar, catching his breath. There is a safe house across the river, he said. We can stay there until the board releases the investigation results. Claire nodded, shivering. Do you trust anyone? Only you, he said without hesitation. The words hit her harder than the cold. For the first time, she saw the man behind the title, the one who had built walls out of survival, and was now standing before her, stripped of everything but truth. Hours later, they sat in a dim room lit by a single lamp, the sound of rain still echoing outside. Nathan handed her a cup of coffee, his fingers brushing hers briefly. When this is over, he said quietly, you can walk away from all of it. From me. You will be free. Claire looked at him, her eyes steady. Do you really think freedom means leaving the one person who finally told me the truth? Nathan did not answer. He just watched her, the storm outside softening into silence. For the first time in months, neither of them felt like running. The danger was still out there, but so was something else. Something real, fragile, and just beginning to take shape between them. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean but restless. The story about Victor's corruption was everywhere, front pages, breaking news, business networks, running footage from the chaotic shareholders' meeting. Ward Enterprises' stock had frozen. Reporters swarmed the headquarters, and Victor himself had gone silent. Claire and Nathan watched the coverage from the safe house, sitting side by side on a worn couch that smelled faintly of dust and old leather. Nathan's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. It is happening, he said quietly. The board is demanding Victor's resignation. Claire glanced at him, searching his face. So you did it. We did it. But Nathan did not smile. His expression stayed heavy. Not yet. Victor still controls half the assets. If he can destroy the hard copies before the audit, he can erase the evidence. Claire frowned. Where are they? He looked down, hesitating. The physical files are stored in the Ward Tower archives. That is the one place I could not reach while I was hiding. Then we go there, she said without missing a beat. Nathan's brow furrowed. It is too dangerous. Victor has security on every floor. We have been running for months, Claire said firmly. I am not hiding anymore. We finish this today. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, then finally nodded. All right, he said. We go tonight. They spent the afternoon preparing. Claire found a change of clothes in one of the storage trunks. Black jeans, a simple jacket, and gloves that fit a little too snug. Nathan mapped out the route on an old blueprint of the building. There is a service elevator on the west side, he explained. It will take us directly to the archive floor. We copy the files, send them to the press, and get out. As night fell, the city seemed to hold its breath. They slipped through the back streets, avoiding cameras and patrols. Claire's heart pounded with every step, but Nathan's calm presence steadied her. When they reached the tower, the glass walls reflected the moonlight like mirrors. Nathan swiped a stolen access card, and the doors opened with a soft chime. The elevator ride felt endless. Neither of them spoke. The only sound, the mechanical hum and the faint thud of her heartbeat. When the doors slid open, They stepped into a dark corridor lined with locked cabinets and blinking servers. Nathan moved quickly, entering codes into the main terminal. "Almost there," he murmured. But before he could finish, the lights flickered. The hum of the building died. Claire froze. A voice echoed from the shadows. "You really should have stayed gone, brother." Victor stepped out from the darkness, flanked by 2 guards. His smile was thin and venomous. "And Mrs. Ward, I must admit, you play the loyal wife better than I expected." Nathan's jaw tightened. "It is over, Victor. The board knows everything." Victor chuckled. "The board knows what I let them know. You think a few files and your little speech can destroy me?" He nodded to his men. "Take the drive." One of the guards lunged forward, but Claire reacted first, swinging a metal clipboard at his arm. The drive slipped from his grasp, skidding across the floor. Nathan grabbed it and shoved it into his pocket. "Run!" he shouted. They bolted down the hallway as alarms blared to life. Red lights flashed. Sirens screamed. Footsteps thundered behind them. The elevator was locked, so they dashed toward the emergency stairwell. Halfway down, Victor's voice echoed after them. "You cannot hide forever, Nathan. You are still a criminal in their eyes." "Then, let them see who the real one is," Nathan shouted back. They burst through a side door and into the rain-soaked alley. A black car screeched to a stop in front of them. For a split second, Claire thought it was Victor's men. But then she saw the driver's face, a familiar one. "Get in!" shouted a young woman from the Harbor Light Foundation. Nathan hesitated only a moment before pulling Claire inside. As the car sped off, sirens faded behind them. Claire clutched the flash drive against her chest, trembling. Nathan turned to her, breathless. "You saved us," he said. She met his gaze, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "No, Nathan. We saved each other." Outside, the first light of dawn began to break over the skyline. The city looked different now, still broken, still cold, but finally awake. The drive to the Harbor Light Foundation was silent except for the rhythm of tires against wet asphalt. The woman driving, Mia, glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "The news is spreading fast," she said. "Victor has been detained for questioning, but he will not stay quiet for long." Claire exhaled slowly, her fingers still wrapped tightly around the flash drive. Nathan leaned back, his head resting against the seat. "We just need to release the full files," he said. "Once the data hits the press, there is no going back." Mia nodded. "The board already suspects everything, but this will end it. You two just need to stay alive long enough to see it through." When they arrived, the foundation's lights were still on despite the early morning hour. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and printer ink greeted them. Henry's empty office was just as they had left it, a silent reminder of the cost already paid. Claire sat at the computer terminal and inserted the drive, her hands steady despite the exhaustion. Nathan stood beside her, his reflection visible in the dark window. The files loaded one by one: contracts, wire transfers, offshore ledgers. Mia joined them, her voice low but firm. "Once I press send, there is no undoing this. Are you both sure?" Nathan looked at Claire. "Are you?" She met his eyes and nodded. "We finish it together." Mia hit the button. A soft chime followed, almost anticlimactic. Just like that, the truth was free. Dozens of media outlets began receiving encrypted links with full documentation of Victor's fraud. Claire watched the progress bar until it reached 100%, then sat back, exhaling a shaky breath. "It is done," she whispered. Nathan turned toward her, his eyes tired but full of something deeper: admiration, maybe even awe. "You did what I could not," he said quietly. "You gave them the truth." "We both did," she replied. "You just forgot you were not alone." Before he could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. Mia drew a sharp breath. "They found us." The next moments were a blur of movement. Nathan grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her toward the side exit while Mia stayed behind, locking the door. "Go," Mia shouted. "I will delay them." Claire hesitated, but Nathan tugged her forward. They sprinted down the corridor and out into the alley, where dawn was beginning to break. Two black SUVs turned the corner behind them. Nathan pulled her into an adjacent building under construction. They ducked behind a pile of concrete bags, breathing hard. Footsteps echoed close. Nathan reached into his coat and handed her something small and metallic, the backup drive. "Take it," he said. "If something happens, you finish this without me." Claire shook her head fiercely. "Do not. You dare say that. We are in this together." "Claire." "No," she hissed. "We survived everything else. We will survive this too." The footsteps grew louder, closer. Suddenly, a loud voice rang out from the street. "Police! Drop your weapons!" The sound of shouting and running followed. Through the half-open doorway, Claire saw a swarm of officers rushing past. For a moment, confusion replaced fear. Nathan peeked out cautiously. "Mia must have called them," he said. Relief washed over her. But before she could respond, a single gunshot cracked through the air. Nathan flinched, his body jerking backward. "Nathan!" Claire screamed, catching him as he fell. His hand gripped her wrist tightly, eyes wide with shock. "I am fine," he gasped, though the blood soaking his sleeve told another story. The police stormed the area, apprehending the remaining men. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but to Claire, everything felt like slow motion. She held Nathan's face in her hands, rain and tears blurring her vision. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Do not you dare leave me again." Nathan's breathing was shallow, but he managed a faint smile. "I told you. We finished this together." The paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher, and she followed, her hand never leaving his. As they drove toward the hospital, Claire glanced out the window at the rising sunday. It painted the city in gold and pink, as if washing away the shadows of the night. Somewhere behind them, the world was learning the truth about Victor Hale. And for the first time, Claire allowed herself to believe that maybe this fight had been worth every scar. Nathan's eyes fluttered open briefly, and he whispered, "You saved me." Claire leaned closer, her voice trembling. "No, Nathan. You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." The next few weeks passed in a blur of hospitals, headlines, and healing. Nathan's surgery was successful, but his recovery was slow. Claire stayed by his side every day, reading the news aloud while he rested. The world had finally seen the truth. Victor Hale had been arrested and charged with corporate fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. Ward Enterprises had issued a public apology, reinstating Nathan as the rightful CEO. When Nathan was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, the board offered to hold a press conference to clear his name. He refused. "Let the evidence speak," he said simply. "I am done performing for people who only care about power." Claire smiled at that, proud of the man he had become. He had lost everything once, and somehow found something real in its place. A few days later, they returned to the penthouse, the same one where their story had begun. The silence inside was no longer heavy. It felt peaceful, almost reborn. The ring he had once placed on her finger as part of a contract now gleamed under the morning sun like a quiet promise. Claire stood by the window, looking out over the city. Nathan walked up behind her, his arm still bandaged but steady as he slipped it around her waist. "You know," he said softly, "when I first asked you to marry me, I thought I was buying convenience." She turned slightly, smiling. "And what do you think now?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Now I know I was given grace. You could have walked away 100 times, but you stayed." Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe because I stopped seeing the contract and started seeing the man behind it." He chuckled quietly. "And here I thought I was the one rescuing you." "We rescued each other," she said. For a while they stood in silence, the city humming faintly below them. Then Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal document. "What is this?" she asked, unfolding it. "Our contract," he said. "The original one. the deal that started it all. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded. He took it from her hands, struck a match, and set it aflame. The fire curled through the paper, turning words into ash. "No more deals," he said. "No more conditions. From now on, whatever we build, it is real." Claire watched the ashes drift into the breeze from the open window, her eyes glistening. "So what now?" she asked, softly. "Now," Nathan said, reaching into his other pocket, "we start over." He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not the one from the contract, but a simple gold band engraved with 2 words. "For real." Claire's breath caught as he dropped to one knee. Not out of formality, but out of truth. "Claire," he said, voice quiet, but steady, "I married you once, because I needed saving. This time, I am asking because I love you. Will you stay not out of obligation, but because you choose to?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, it felt right. Outside, the morning light spilled across the skyline, bathing everything in gold. Months later, Ward Enterprises transformed into a foundation supporting ethical business and community work, a tribute to both Henry and the Harbor Light team. Claire ran the program herself, while Nathan focused on rebuilding what mattered most: trust. On their anniversary, they visited the quiet rooftop, where everything had changed. Claire placed the old sketchbook she once carried beside the potted plant Nathan had started keeping there. "A reminder," she said, "of where we began." Nathan smiled, taking her hand. "And where we are going." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood side by side. No contracts, no secrets, just 2 people who had finally found peace in each other. Their story had begun as a transaction, but it ended as a promise that love built on truth never needs signatures to last forever.